Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining our session today. We're going to have a conversation about scale with steak. Well, it's kind of a couple letters off. It's really close, Adrian, steak and scale, but we're getting there. Hey, you play, what is that, Wordle enough? Then you start thinking in these ways. So,
Yes, indeed.
that's right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jim. I'm a principal product evangelist here at Cockroach Labs. I love talking to our customers about what's going on, what they're doing, how they're using Cockroach, and really how they're solving the challenge of scale within their organizations, with the database and beyond. And I'm really excited to have Adrian join us today from Steak, who is one of our customers. And actually, it's the end of my day here, but it's the beginning of your day there, right, Adrian?
Very much so. It's very much early in the morning for me at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just introduce myself a little bit. So I'm Adrian Hanley. I'm nominally the head of DevOps here at Stake. I've been here for about a year. Before this, I sort of was in high frequency trading or prop trading for about like 12 to 15 years. So it's a bit of a new experience for me, but yeah, it's been all good.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a new experience, but it's a little bit of the old new again, right? As well. I mean, high frequency trading to what Stake does now, you're at least in the same realm, Adrian, right? Like,
yeah, there's a lot of sort of crossovers. So like obviously sort of the market connectivity, all those kind of things. And I think there's also a lot of technical problems that are very, very similar.
yeah.
A lot of the things with sort of high frequency trading is it's very data driven. And as you can imagine, with data driven, you've got a lot of data to sort of handle, to look after, to make sure it's performant, make sure it's in the right place at the right time. And same thing for us at Stake as well. So while we're not sort of making data driven trading decisions, we kind of leave that up to our customers to do that. We need to be able to provide them with their data at the right place at the right time, no matter where they are in the world. So similar sort of problems, just a different driving force for both.
Yeah. And it's Steak, but I think if they want to find it on the web, it's hellosteak.com. Is that correct, Adrian?
It is Hello's. Yeah, it is Hello Steak. There's a bit of a story behind that one. So we started out as steak.com.au. We wanted to take on the global market. So we wanted to go steak.com because .au obviously is a bit sort of like tied to Australia. We looked at stake.com. It's actually owned by a sports betting site, a quite successful sports betting site, and they were not willing to let go of the .com domain. So this is why we're hellostake.com.
Yeah. It's funny how companies get named these days. Is the URL there? You know what I mean? So Adrian, what does Stake do? Just to give the level set in the background. I mean, people can go check out the website hellostake.com and stuff, but like, what do you all do?
Yeah. So nominally we're a sort of online broker. So what we're trying to do, so our sort of main kind of selling point at the moment is we're trying to give people outside of the US access to the US market. So to give you a bit of a story around that one. So like I said, I worked in high frequency trading for 12 to 15 years, depending on how you count it. One of the guys I encountered there was a guy by the name of Matthew Leibowitz. Now, we both started at another company like within a week of each other. And this was a small startup trading firm. There were about 6 odd people. I think I was employee number 5 and he was employee number 6. So like we're about a week apart. So fast forward about 15 years, I left to sort of go on to other things. And Matt had also left as well to go on and start Stake. And now he was, from his time at that trading firm, he was a big believer that what he refers to as the North American wealth generating engines, which are like the NYSE, the CBOE, CME, NASDAQ, those kind of things. He said, like, that's where you need to be. Like, that's where the volume is. That's where the market rate is. This is where everything ticks. He said every other market kind of ticks from these markets. So like when they tick, the other ones tick with them. So you may as well be in there. And he kind of like recognized this market sort of opportunity to sort of go, right, if you're not a US citizen and you're not in the continental US or US in general, it's really hard to trade on those markets.
That's
it's incredibly hard. Like you need a lot of money. You often need the right connections as well.
You need a broker, right? I mean, is it still
and the broker
base if you're outside the country, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And you need, and that broker will ask a lot of you. So like you either have to have a really good reputation or you have to have a lot of money. And that kind of precludes a lot of people from sort of trading in that market. So he sort of sat down and went, right, there's obviously a market opportunity here. People want to get into this market, but they can't. It's hard. There's a lot of upfront you have to get through. And even when you get through that upfront, it's still not as easy as you would like. So like, for example, one of the situations is if I wanted to buy like a one share of Tesla on the NASDAQ, for argument's sake, I don't know what the value is at the moment, but let's say it's nominally $200 per share. I'd have to put in like $50,000 just to do that,
Yep.
right? And that's not within most people's reach at the moment. So he was like, well, how do we sort of democratize this? How do we get this sort of wealth generating engine in the hands of people outside of the continental US? And that's kind of Stake's sort of like selling point here. So while we are an online broker similar to other ones that you can kind of find out there, we're more targeted at people outside the US to give them access to those wealth generating engines inside the US.
That's awesome. It's interesting you're talking, like I was asking about brokers because, I'm sorry, but I grew up on the south side of Chicago. So yeah. I know so many guys that work at the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, the CBOE, and the CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Those jobs are all changing now too. I mean, online trading has become ridiculously popular. So has it always been kind of popular outside the States? And then basically this is just tapping into the US market for that kind of that appetite. Yeah.
100%. I think like there are definitely markets in the sort of financial systems in the world. So the US is one of them, the UK is another. So they're very old and they're very mature. And so they've always had really not easy ways, but really, really solid ways of connecting to them. But outside of those two markets, it's always been a little bit difficult and a little bit hard. And so that's why sort of online brokerages have really taken off outside the US, because it's been that tricky hurdle to sort of get over to get into these things. So that's where the sort of market opportunity is coming from.
Well, I guess my first takeaway will be like, first of all, everybody go try if you're outside of the country, outside of the US, I guess, go try hellostake.com, like go check it out. If you're into that sort of thing, you know what I mean? There'll be another one, but a little bit later, I'll get to my second one. But y'all, Adrian, before the session we were talking, and I think you guys had a pretty big like jump in users and activity kind of around this whole GameStop craziness, right? The GameStop thing was what, 2 years ago or 3 years ago now?
Yeah, just over 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
So just a little bit between sort of 1.5 and 2 years ago now. So so it's the beginning of 2021. A lot of people were shorting the GameStop company because delivery models and whatnot. We can go into that at another time, but there was a reason why they were shorting it. A lot of people sort of online believed that wasn't true, or they could see a market opportunity where this wasn't going to be a thing. And so they were kind of like pushing against the short. And what that basically generated is just a lot of social media hype, which basically turned into a lot of just general media hype as well.
That's right.
And everyone kind of piled into this. And for us at Stake, what that basically meant was like we kind of had your standard setup where we were in Amazon, we had EC2s, we had RDS, we had all of that kind of stuff. Standard sort of stuff. You'd see it probably duplicated 1,000 times around the world. And then suddenly one day we're just getting all of this traffic, like masses of traffic, absolute masses of traffic. And the main database couldn't keep up. So it was a Postgres database running an RDS. And so we vertically scaled it a couple of times. We actually hit the max Amazon would allow for us. And then we were kind of stuck. We're in the corner. And so then we spent probably a good 72 hours straight, like no sleep kind of thing, just refactoring code so it would run faster, because we couldn't add more database behind this thing. It just wouldn't work. And so like we're building memory stores in Redis in like 2 hours and bringing them online. We're changing the way the sort of auth mechanism was working in 30 minutes. So all of these kind of changes that you normally take 6 months to do, we're just kind of smashing it out in like hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, hour 4. And if you look back at sort of the Git log, you can kind of see this nice trend pattern of like, sort of really regular releases, and then GameStop, and there was just this mountain of like release as we were trying to just keep up with that flow. And so once all that dust settled, and I will be honest, there was a couple of times where we went offline because we couldn't keep up. And obviously in that sort of media frenzy, people were seeing us go offline, and they're like, oh, you're protecting the establishment, you're not allowing us to trade. So that wasn't good. And we were trying to be as vocal as we can. It was like, no, it's not that. We're just literally struggling with the volume.
Guys.
Yeah.
Right. Like this isn't the man keeping you down.
Yeah.
I guess it was, it was the database, but that's a wholly other thing. It was,
Yeah, no, exactly. So like there was obviously like people going exactly as you said, like, oh, you're trying to sort of, keep us out of the market. It's like, no, we would love anything for you to be in the market because we're making money at the same time. So this is hurting
yeah,
us as well. So when all that dust settled, we sat down and we did a bit of like a massive postmortem around what happened, why did it happen, how do we avoid this
yeah,
again? And so one of the key things that sort of came out of that was like the database itself was kind of the cornerstone of all of those issues. Like, sure, we could write, better code, which is what we did, but at the same time, there's only so much you could do around sort of, making queries better, making them efficient, making sure
yeah,
you've got indexes in the right place, partitioning tables, all that kind of stuff, before you're eventually just going to run out of headroom. And that's what we had. Well, that's what we ran into. Um, so we sat down and went, right, well, we want to expand. Like, Stake obviously had pretty aggressive expansion plans at the time and still does. And they were like, well, we want to expand, so this problem's only going to get worse. So unless we sort of deal
yeah,
with this problem now, it's
yep,
going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And then we might be having these outages every month or so, and we don't want to do that. So we sat down and we went to a number of different providers to sort of figure out, like, how do we get this sort of horizontal scalability? So that was, feature number one. We've wanted this horizontal scalability. We wanted to be able to go, cool, we need 4 more machines and we need them today. Like, we need them right now. We need them online
yep,
now. We don't want to have to wait, like, especially with the vertical scaling in RDS, we had to go offline, vertically scale, come back online. So we didn't want to do that. So that was one problem. And then the next sort of problem, or the next feature we're looking for is, like, we want to go global. Like, and while we're sort of in Australia, Brazil, and the UK, we wanted to do that. We wanted to open it up to the world as a whole. Obviously not North America just yet, because that doesn't work, but everyone excluding North America. We wanted to sort of take in that reign. And so we really needed a database that would allow us to have the same data, but in multiple regions, but to be right and read consistent.
yeah,
Now, we could build something like that ourselves where we sync everything together and whatnot, but that's not a product we can sell, if that makes sense. It's not something that, we can kind of put on the tick and go, hey, customers, this is a new cool feature that you're going to love. Please use it. So we decided that, no, that's not Stake's mainline business. We're going to look for someone else to do that one. And so we worked with a couple of vendors to sort of go through the sort of go for the features, go through the offerings. Basically, we did send a bunch of tenure requests. And we arrived at Cockroach.
yeah,
And so when we sort of went through all the features, Cockroach delivered all the different features that we're after. And most importantly, which was an unexpected surprise for us, like, Cockroach supported Postgres on the wire, which meant a lot of our SQL didn't have to be rewritten. A lot of our libraries didn't have to be written. A lot of those things we could just kind of lift and shift with a little bit of tuning on the way
yeah,
through. We were managed to sort of move most of our application with maybe a 5% rewrite or less in
yeah,
some cases. And to be honest with you, most of that rewrite was just making sure we had the right index in the right place, and then we're away. And so we literally moved our production application one Sunday afternoon. Like, it took us about 4 hours.
wow, that's awesome, dude. So I want to come back to the migration. I want to come back to like the thought around Cockroach and all that, but I also want to ask a little bit more about the really kind of the architecture of the application itself and kind of how that works, Adrian, because I think it helps people understand, like, okay,
Sure.
what does this mean at scale? What does it mean for me? Like, do I have similar systems, right? So how does it work? I mean, is somebody like doing trades and then you're like shuttling it off to like Kafka to authorize the trade and do this, and then you're writing to a system of record? Like, how does that
Yeah.
flow from, the tip of the, I guess, the mouse of the user to the
Yep.
database work? I mean, there's a lot going on, right?
Yeah, no, there is. I'll sort of keep that like fairly high level, but like,
Yeah, totally. I for sure. Just a sense of that. I'm super curious of
yeah,
that kind of stuff always.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
for sure, more than happy to talk about that one. I'll also kind of add into this, we're dual cloud at the moment as well. So this is one thing Cockroach is helping with us. We're in AWS and GCP
You
at the
are
same
cool.
time.
Yeah.
Um, so like, how that all flows together is, like, we've got sort of data centers or AWS regions. So AWS is still taking about 80% of our load. We've slowly migrating that over
Sure.
to GCP, but that takes a while. But so right now, most of our load sits in AWS and most of our functionality sits in AWS. So with AWS, we've got regions throughout the world. So we've got Sydney, we've got one in Sao Paulo, and we've got one in London, so EUS2. And from there, so like when you're sort of log in, so you've either got your web app or your mobile app up and running, Cockroach helps in two ways. So one, it's looking after our auth system. So this is where all our tokens are stored. This is where this is where they live. This is where they kind of records, sort of like pulls it out from and then stores it in an in-memory database. But the reason why we use Cockroach for this is that like it's able to sync these tokens around the world for us. So as sort of people log in, that table, that auth table is now synced around the world. So what that basically means is like if I'm a user and I sort of log into sort of stake in Sydney, do a bunch of trades, then I jump on a 21-hour flight to Sweden, and I rock up in Stockholm and whip out my phone, it functions exactly the same. Like the latency is there. And that's important for us because a lot of our traders, our customers, they're really quite sophisticated and they're really quite advanced. So they'll place trades that need to be hit on the market open, if that makes sense. So like just before NYSE goes online or NASDAQ goes online, you'll see them in there just stacking their trades up, ready to go. So they're like 80% of our customers are not your mum and dad traders who just like will buy a share in a large, blue chip company and we're just going to let it sit there for 5 to 10 years. Like these are sort of aggressive day traders. So we need to have that latency as low as possible for these guys, no matter where they are in the world. And if it's not that low, they will ring us up, like physically ring us up and complain that it's not as fast as it should be. So that's one way where Cockroach helps to sort of get that sort of latency going. It's helping with the auth system, so getting everyone online, making sure being a finance company, every single call into the system has to be auth. There is no sort of like edge where it's like, cool, once you pass this edge, that's cool. We don't worry about you. Every single call has an auth token to it. Every single service has to check that auth token, and then that has to go into a ledger, which leads me on to my second point. We run our own ledger. We build our own ledger. Now, that sounds really easy when you say it. It's actually incredibly hard. And the ledger, that tracks money flow in and out and orders in and out. We're looking to add crypto trading within the next couple of months. So it's tracking orders coming in and out of crypto, sort of onto the blockchain and whatnot. And building that ledger out is immensely complex, but also again has to be available worldwide, and it also has to be scalable. And this is where sort of Cockroach helps in that one as well. So it makes that ledger available worldwide, but it also means that within a particular region, if we get a lot of people trading or a lot of trades going on, which is pushing data in and out of that ledger really, really quick, we can kind of scale that region up to handle those trades. So while sort of, we might be hyper busy in London for argument's sake, but not so busy in Australia, we can have, let's say, we've got a 9-node cluster, but we can say, right, cool, in London where there's normally 3 nodes, let's have 15 for today, and it will scale up and away we go, and it sort of handles that load. So that's really helpful for having that ledger there, but also consistent as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the ledger is really critical too, because if something does go wrong, you have a system, you have a guaranteed correct system of record. Right? I mean, and that's the thing 100%. There, right? And I take that, and the identity auth has to be quick. It has to be everywhere, right? Like, and that's such a key thing. I presume you're using other databases as well, Adrian, to do like, I presume you're still using Redis, because I mean, that seems to me like something that would be applicable to get stuff to people really, really quickly in lots of different places, right?
Yeah. So in that auth model I was sort of talking about before, we do use Redis, but we use regional Redis. So we just use regional Redis to sort of read from the auth table from Cockroach and then populate Redis that way.
That's right.
So very, very similar to sort of like your traditional sort of like auth system, but this time it's got a global database at the back of it, as opposed to just a local database.
I'm sorry, but I always like to bring that up because it's like, I work at Cockroach Labs, dude. I would love everything to be Cockroach DB, but I think like what you're doing is complex, and there's like a lot of different workloads that make up your application. And so like the right database for the right cadence or whatever the goal is for that particular piece, I still think is really important. Some people talk
100%.
about like convergence of a database into one thing, man. It could do like, I don't
Yeah.
believe it. I don't know.
No, that is a good point. Yeah, so we do use Redis for the like high volatility, low latency stuff, mainly
Yeah.
auth, to be honest with you. So that's where we kind of store all of that. We use Cockroach for most of the application stuff. So like the ledger, the trades going in and out,
Yeah.
like your financial positions, everything you could imagine from a
Yeah.
financial system. And then we're actually making use of one of the new Cockroach features where it can publish to a Google PubSub queue.
Yep.
And we write to GCP's BigQuery for a
That's
data
great.
warehouse.
That's
So that's
cool.
where sort of all the analytics from the business. So the business analytics, the know your customer kind of thing, the marketing, that's where all that comes from. That comes out of
Yeah.
BigQuery at the end of the day. So yeah, we're most definitely 3 different databases
Yeah.
making it work.
I think the pub stuff was part of this recent release 22.1.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, made it. Yeah, we're really happy to see that because before we were doing the sort of
I'm
dump
sure
ETL and in.
I'm sure we would have got you in as like a beta or something to figure it out.
Yeah,
You know
no,
what I mean? Like, yeah, it's kind of one of those things. I think the native CDC capabilities and PubSub and that stuff, it's just super powerful as you start to kind of build these larger kind of event-driven systems. Yeah, so
yeah, 100%, and it means that sort of going to while we're moving to GCP, going to PubSub kind of lines up with that, and also means that we can use things on the data, like you said, like inline, and we can do ETL processes using Google Data Proc, so that the schema that comes out of Cockroach is not the same schema that we want in BigQuery. We want more of a star schema in BigQuery, and we have more of a spread out schema in Cockroach. And so that enables us to do ETL on the fly. So as the rows are written, they get translated and transferred, and they arrive in the data warehouse, probably at most a second or two behind live. And that means that the marketing guys and everyone who's doing a bit of research around our customers are not that far behind. Like before, they're about a day behind. Now they're almost at the second.
Yeah.
Which makes
And
their
then
life a lot.
what are you all using for ETL, Adrian?
At the at the moment it's very much an in-house written stack. So we did look at a couple of sort of off-the-shelf things, but like our head of engineering, so our head of development, he is an ex-data scientist. So like he kind of led the charge on that one, sort of set that one up. So it's very much an in-house written stack at the moment.
Yeah, it's not that hard if you know what the data models are and you know where they need to go. It's not that difficult to do. It's just when you have a lot of that going on, one of those tools starts to make a whole lot of sense, or a lot of people doing a lot of different things with the data. I think that's where those tools start. And there's some really interesting ones out there now. So I always ask because I worked at Talend for like 4 years at one point. So like, but a long time ago. So I have this kind of like, my heart is in data integration and master data management, all that.
No, for sure. Well, it's actually an interesting story. Like the head of engineering, his past is also high frequency trading, and he comes from a direct competitor of the company I used to work for, and Matt used to work for. So we literally sat on opposite sides of the table for a very long time.
Yeah, I love it.
But yeah.
You know, dudes, some of my best friends are people that I competed against. Like, you know, I was at Hortonworks in the early days, right? And Hortonworks and Cloudera were fighting each other, the Hadoop market and all that stuff. And there was a guy in product marketing on the other side of that I love to drive him mad every day and fight against him. But like in the end, I had total respect for the guy because basically doing the same thing as you know? And like at Talend, there was a guy at Informatica that I'm still friends with, a guy by the name of Clark Patterson. He's at Snowflake now. So we're rooting for each other. You know what I mean? Like, I love what he's doing. He's loving what I'm doing. We're like, yeah, it's fun, dude. So anyways, I love how this stuff works. I want to come back to the migration. You guys were on Postgres, you were on 9.6, right?
Yes.
And you migrated to Cockroach. Can you just talk to me about like what that process was? Because like doing a migration in an afternoon, I'm sorry, Adrian, that's pretty awesome. Because like every time anybody says, "Oh, migrations are easy," I'm like, that's bull. You know what I mean? Like they're never easy, right? Like there's always something. But like in a half a day, that's pretty awesome. Can you just talk to me about that process?
Yeah, 100% can do. So I do want to caveat this whole speech with like, we didn't just go, Sunday afternoon, let's give it a go.
Right.
There was like a couple of like dress rehearsals, let's try it, see how it works and whatnot. So I think we did about 3 different 3 or 4 different full rehearsals over like the preceding month, so that when we got there, it was nice and smooth and ready to go. We also did have the advantage that we were able to move some of our smaller regions first. So like our sort of European trading is not the same size as our Australian trading. So we moved that first just to see how that would go. So that was also a sort of production dress rehearsal. But yeah, so the migration, like I said, happened in a couple of hours. And so it was very, very simple for us. Like it did require an outage. But basically what we did is we took the app down, we dumped out the Postgres database, and then we imported the Postgres database. So there's the command line for that one, straight into Cockroach. Cockroach assembled it all, and away it went. Now, there were a few things we had to change, and these are things we learned when we did those dress rehearsals. So Cockroach is very sensitive to where your indexes are and how they work and where you put them. So while in a normal database, an index is a great thing, you need it there. They're normally indexes in a normal database where sort of overcome the limitations of writing sectors to disk. But most modern machines, even in the cloud, now have IOPS through the roof, so they can kind of hide that problem for you. So like if you haven't done your indexing well, those sort of single instance databases will hide that problem for you. They just have performance to burn, and they're like, oh yeah, cool, don't worry about it. Whereas in Cockroach, the way it sort of distributes its data, the way it uses its RAF mechanism to sort of make sure that the sort of data is distributed across 3 or more nodes and it's highly redundant and all that kind of thing, means that you need to have your indexes in the right place, because the indexes tell Cockroach what node to get it from, as well as what part of the disk to get it from. And if you do not do that, it will do a full table scan, which, like I said, in a normal database, it kind of hides it for you. In Cockroach, you are incurring network hop latency when you do that. And so if you've got a massive amount of data and you spread it over, 15 nodes like we did, it's got to go to all 15 to pull it in, bring it back to one node and send it to you. So I think the big learning point from us in the migration was double check where your indexes are, do a dress rehearsal, walk through every single function you have 3 or 4 times, time it and compare to where it was before, and then look at what the SQL is doing, and then tune and rinse and repeat until you're done.
Yeah. And I presume you had to do it. Go on, Adrian, please. Sorry, I didn't want to.
Oh, yeah. No, just all that preparation means that on the day, it becomes very, very easy to do. It's just a simple export, import, create index.
Watch the thing, pray, make sure it happens. So I presume you guys did what, like, I mean, not follow the, I guess follow the sun. Like, you guys did just like 3 regions and kind of you were done, or is that how it worked out?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. So we sort of, we did 3 regions around the world. So Europe, South America, and Australia. They kind of cover the globe for where we want to sort of trade at the moment, where our customer base is. And so we rolled out Europe first, and then we left it for a week to soak, and then we rolled out South America second, and we left that for a week.
Interesting.
And then we rolled out Australia last. And
so how did it work with with the heterogeneous environment, right? Because I presume in the old world you had 3 instances of Postgres in the 3 regions, right? And so you're kind of in this heterogeneous moment where you have kind of like, okay, there's one region with Cockroach, and then you have 2 Postgres. Were you still doing basically kind of asynchronous replication into like Cockroach? And, because you still needed to maintain like the correct data, right, across all 3 places, or did you just kind of like lose that for a minute?
Well, we're fortunate enough that like the sort of ledgers for each region were separate at the time. They're now merged, which was a bit of work we can talk about later at the time. But ledgers were separate for each region. And that was for a couple of different reasons. One was for GDPR. So Europe's quite big on GDPR, and that's kind of permeated throughout the world. And South America's got its various own sort of PII data laws, and so does Australia. So it was easy for us, if you roll the clock back 3 years, it was easy for us at the time just to build regional. Roll it forward 3 years, we've gotten a lot better at understanding what those regulations mean from our data point of view and what we have to pin per region and what we don't. So it meant that at migration time, we just had regional databases we need to move, and we could just lock them to the region for the time.
Right on.
And then once we'd moved, the second phase was to sort of come up with a global ledger, merge all that data into the global ledger. So that's just one database to another inside Cockroach, which is relatively easy to do. And then just look at the pieces that need to be pinned to region, and you could use like the feature in Cockroach to row pin that bit of data to region. And normally it's like identifiable data. So things like like your address, like we call them tax file numbers, but over there they're that would be the equivalent of a social security number.
Yep.
Unique things that identify you exactly as a person will have to be locked in your region, but everything else, as long as you've got that structure, can roam.
Right.
So your username, login, data, passwords, all of those things can roam because they're not going to uniquely identify you. So yeah, in that initial sort of move, we just had the regionals, and then a month later, I think it was a month and a half later, we came up with the global sort of ledger system and the global sort of user system, and then we spent probably about 2 weeks merging data from all of these 3 databases into that new schema, and then we're off.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you're using some pretty there's it's the feature of Cockroach. When I first saw it, I was like, come on, that is so cool. Like the fact that you could actually pin data to a location at the table level, and it's simple like DDL, like you just basically control. It's an alter table command, and okay, there it goes. Like
so useful.
Okay, yeah.
It's one of the probably unsung features.
Well, I think it's really cool. I do think being able to do Cockroach can run across multiple cloud providers. I've seen people do that with it. That's another one that I'm like, wow, one single logical database like that. But you're using, Adrian, you're using a lot of interesting tech at stake. Yeah. You guys were Java and now you're coding in Go. Is that right? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
that's 100%. So the old world, like what we call the old world, so that's where our AWS installed was written. It was written in Java, and there's nothing against Java. It's right language for right people and that kind of thing. But for us, it was written in Java, and it was written in a hurry. As you can imagine, with any startup, they wanted to turn the idea from from conception into an actual product really, really quickly. So they took what they knew and they just kind of ran with it and sort of built it out. And a lot of startups are going to have a very familiar story to this, where they're like, oh yeah, it was just mad times. We're trying to throw everything together. We just wanted to get it to work. And so it was written in Java, and it was written in a very monolithic way. And now the problem with that is that over the years, it became very hard to modify. Because if I'm writing a new feature or a new function inside Java, I need to know that, hey, I'm calling this person's function, I'm modifying this. Oh, it's broken that. Now I need to understand that bit of code. And you just go down the rabbit hole. And before you know it, you're 3 months into a feature. You've got this feature branch that's 3 months old. You're trying to merge it back into main, and you've got merge conflicts all over the place. You're like, oh, that's not great. So what we really wanted to do was sort of go, cool, how do we help the developers out? How do we make this easy to understand? Also, we're trying to scale the teams here. So we're trying to grow the engineering team by 3, so 3 times the size. And adding 3 times as many people, you want them to become fully effective as fast as they can be. Because it's just hard to train people. It takes away your current engineering's time to train new engineers. So you want to sort of minimize that impact as much as possible. So we looked at this and we went, right, cool. We want to sort of take on the microservice model just so we can produce smaller services with smaller code base, which is easier for a developer to understand and get a handle on. And so that when we've got new developers coming on board, they can get up to speed quicker, but also existing developers, when they change projects or they change feature teams, they can kind of get up to speed. So this is where GCP came from, and this is where Kubernetes and GCP, so GKE came from, and this is where Go came from. So not only are we moving databases, we're moving technologies that talk to those databases as well.
So you're basically
in a hectic time.
You're like top to bottom cloud native stack. I contend that going from the layer of basically Kubernetes up through pods and containers into things like distributed databases, all running on Kubernetes, and then using kind of threaded languages like a Go or a Rust, top to bottom is really, really super powerful, right? And so are you guys going you guys kind of full cloud native stack from all operations as well?
Yeah, 100%. So
yeah,
from the very sort of one side of it, we're infrastructure as code all the way up. So we use KCC, which is sort of Google's version of Terraform to manage sort of all of our regions, all of the interconnect, everything you can do in sort of Google is managed by that, to the point where if we need to stand up a new sort of project inside GCP, we can do it in about 5 minutes. Like, 30 seconds of editing a file and 5 minutes of waiting for Google to do it. And same thing with sort of like adding a region in Cockroach, we can do the same thing. We just did it recently where we had a North American database, and we wanted to sort of move that sort of GCP install over to, well, not move it, but extend it over to Europe. And within half an hour, we had a full Kubernetes instance up and running with applications inside it, as well as the Cockroach database was extended over to work. So we've got infrastructure as code, and then as we sort of go up, we've got Kubernetes that's sitting on top of that. Kind of already spoke to that one a little bit. Then we've got Helm delivering the releases, and then we've got GitHub Actions, which is like the CI/CD tooling, which is pushing the sort of pods into sort of Kubernetes to make it work. And inside GHA, we've got all the sort of like pod scanning, security, binary signing, all of that kind of fun stuff sitting there to make sure we're as secure as we can be in our release cycle. And this whole thing is driven by Git. So like Git commands. So like if I'm a developer, I'm writing a bit of code, I've got my feature branch, I'm happy with it, it's working well on my laptop, it's working well in integration testing, it's all looking really good. I raise my PR, my peers approve the PR, the whole thing just flows from there. So like the Git, the CI/CD pipeline from GitHub just kicks in from there, gets all the right approvals, makes all the database changes as well. So adds users, creates tables, deletes tables, does whatever it needs to do, builds the code, creates the container, runs the code in, loads test the container, walks it through pre-prod, which has a bunch of automated end-to-end testing. And then once all that is done, it creates a chat ops request out to sort of senior members of the team to go, hey, you've got this new release just sitting at the door waiting to go into production. Here's the full trail of the testing and the person that wrote it. Are you okay? They can reply to that bot by saying yes, or they can go to a web page and tick a box if they want to do that one. And then the CI/CD, the platform continues to move and moves it out into production. And so we went from being able to do maybe 1 or 2 rollouts a month to being able to do 1 or 2 rollouts every 5 minutes.
Wait a second. I'm sorry, Adrian. You made this terrifying GameStop moment. You guys said you were releasing what every like a couple of hours.
Oh yeah, that
That's
yes.
That was manual CI/CD though. That was like manual release.
That was like that was I built this on my laptop. I'm gonna SCP it to a machine.
Get it out there.
And then I go to SSH in and then log in and let go. So yeah, that time was definitely not. I
had to come back to you, had to call you, but it's pretty awesome. Like the level of automation, I think is honestly that's just it's just awesome to me that we can do these sort of things right now. You're no longer going to have this like terrifying moment of the thing crashing, right? You have completely resilient systems built on distributed, just the distributed systems built to be resilient, yet scale and move out wherever y'all want to go. Who knows where y'all go from here, but it's like, it seems like the stack is ready to go.
Yep. And this is the thing, like for us, like I said earlier on, one of the sort of key drivers of the business at the moment is to go global.
Yeah.
Is to sort of not limit ourselves to sort of Australia or Brazil or Europe, just to go, cool, you want to join from South Korea, welcome aboard. You want to join from Hong Kong, welcome aboard. You want to join from Singapore, Hong Kong, welcome aboard. Like, we don't want to have to sort of go, no, we can't take you because the latency is going to be too high. You're going to be horrible. So we're just going to blanket ban you. We want to be able to just go, yeah, look, the South Koreans are absolutely loving it. We don't really know why, but they are. So let's fully service that region of the world. And we can do that in half an hour now.
Yeah. It's like you guys can actually just increase your TAM and expand into new markets relatively easily. I mean, look, I hate when people say things are easy, honestly. Like seriously, a lot of work goes into these things, but relatively easily. Yeah. And then like the whole business continuity thing, I think is one of those things that is super huge. And being top to bottom with kind of distributed systems and cloud native. And for us, it's the database. I mean, it's a big key piece of that. So
yeah. And I mean, I'd say like when we say easy, like it's kind of like that old maxim. And someone, I can't remember, it was a golfer, they asked him one day and they said, oh, you were incredibly lucky today. Like he won a tournament. And they interviewed him and said, oh, you're incredibly lucky today. And his response, this always stuck with me. It's like, yeah, the more I practice, the luckier I get.
That's right.
And it's the same thing here. It's like when we say it's easy, it's not because we just went, oh, we're going to do it. It's because we've thought about these things. We've sort of, we tried Cockroach for a very long time before we signed on. We've like put a lot of effort into making it easy.
Yeah.
And so what you see on the day is the result of many, many months
That's right.
of work in the background to sort of make it easy, to make it look like you're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my head of my infrastructure team always reminds me that the engineer you want in infrastructure is the one that is the laziest, because they'll automate it all and they'll just want to sit back and make it work. So it's kind of like that on a company scale. You want to think about this before you get to it rather than when you get to it, because when you get to it, you're just not going to have that time.
Yeah, and I think that's such a big key takeaway. Automation is great, but it takes a lot of preparation, a lot of knowledge to actually get there. But there's huge, massive value in this whole thing. So, Adrian, listen, thank you for doing this today with me. Really appreciate it. I know we're gonna do. I think there's like a QA. We pre-recorded this, y'all. So if I'm not wearing the same clothes or whatever, it isn't like I wouldn't change whatever. But I'm not sure how that's gonna work. But like, I think you are taking questions and stuff, and I know we have like I think the person who worked with you all from our team on this call and whatnot. So. But you're hiring, right, Adrian? Like you're always looking for great people, right?
100%. So like I said earlier on, we're looking to expand the team by like times by 3. Like we're looking to go massive hiring right at the moment. We're looking to hire anywhere in the world. So one of the things the pandemic really taught us very, very well was that work from home actually works really well. And so we're looking to hire wherever we can find people anywhere in the world. So it's just because we're an Australian-based company doesn't mean we're only open to engineers in Australia. We are open to any engineers wherever we can find them at the moment.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny. It seems like the pandemic kind of made distributed systems become like the kind of standard. It just seems like there's been a big increase, but we as people have become big distributed systems as well, dude. Like seriously, like I love it. I love it. I love the sociological parallel to what's going on in tech right now. So it's kind of fun. So, but I mean, honestly, like to me, it's interesting. Y'all are using some pretty powerful and really cool tech. So, I think that's a cool opportunity. So, I mean, cool tech. I work at Cockroach Labs using Cockroach, man. So I think it's pretty cool. But that's another
this is
thing.
This is I mean, and one of the things sort of like just I don't know to drag this on too much longer, but one of the things for me is like we are trying to hire. And it's especially in Australia, but also over the world, it's a competitive market for really good engineers at the moment. So you've got your big players like your Amazon, your Googles, your Facebooks, your Atlassians in Australia is very, very big. Engineering hire. And then you got your traditional sort of like, finance side of the thing. So your big banks, your high frequency traders, like those guys pay a lot of money for people. Like when you're a small startup, you're a tiny fish in this massive pool. And for you to win or be successful, you need to have good engineers, and to get good engineers. For me, I think, it's a combination of pay, good working, good work-life balance, those kind of things, but the ability to be able to play with cool things. Like one of the things that's driven me in my career is like, I really want to use this technology. I'm going to go to a company that uses that technology. I really want to be on the bleeding edge of this. This is why I was in high frequency trading for so long, was because everything was new. Like you'd walk in there every day and be like, oh, wow. Yeah, I remember one day, like a manager of mine said, how do I get a signal faster than light? And I'm like, that doesn't work. But you know what I mean? Like having those sort of brain bending problems sort of sent at you and sort of been saying, solve the problem is kind of where you are. And like, I think this is where Stake is at the moment, is like, we're trying to tackle a sort of global trading experience. And that with it comes as a unique set of problems, which comes with it a unique, cool set of tools. So like we're very much unlike most companies, I'd say, where we're like, oh, we're just going to have an EC2, an RDS, and a API gateway, and we're done. Call it a good one. That's not us. That's not going to work for us. It's not going to work for what we want to do. So yeah, for me, it's key to sort of keep driving this tech forward, because not only gives it what we want to do from a sort of business point of view, but it also attracts people.
Yeah, I'm same. That's all I got to say. It's always emerging tech. I like this, like, like challenging the physical nature of our world. Like, that's awesome. I'm sorry, but like fighting the speed of light is a cool battle. Like it's cool. Like, I mean, I don't think I'm going to be alive when we actually beat the speed of light, but I mean, in the meanwhile, how close can we get? Right. So, there's a physical wire that goes under the ocean. How fast can you do whatever you need to do across that wire?
That was,
awesome.
There's a trick to answering that problem, which we can go into another time. But it was an interesting question you gave me.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, Adrian, again, thank you for doing this. Thanks again for being a customer of Cockroach DB and speaking nicely. But I'm happy it's providing value for you all as well. Like, honestly, like, we're pretty proud of what we built here, and to see it kind of helping like with these type of problems, I think we all get really proud of seeing like it in action, like really solving tough problems. So thank you for doing all that. That's great.
No worries. It's my pleasure. It's working very, very well for us.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Adrian. And thanks everybody for joining us. I hope this was valuable to you all. And hopefully we'll see you next time.